joining us today. This is a presentation for part of the Nebraska Outdoor Women's Month. And so I am hoping to encourage you all to join in the wonderful hobby of birding. Before we begin, just so that we make the presentation run smoother and don't have any connection issues, if you all don't mind, in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen is a mute button, and then it also stops your video, and this will just help everything run smoother. Although I love seeing all your smiling faces, this is just to make everything run a little bit better. So to introduce myself a little bit, I'm Olivia Durugna. I'm the Watchable wildlife biologist at Nebraska Parks. And prior to this position, I was doing my graduate research at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And there I was looking at recreation use at Valentine National Wildlife Refuge, which is in the Sandhills of Nebraska. And any spare time I had, I was out birding. And prior to that, I was doing various field jobs all over the country, from tracking radio telemetry, American woodcock through the swamps of Rhode Island, to staying on top of mountains, counting all the migrating raptors in Washington and New Mexico. And joining me today is Monica McCubry, and she'll introduce herself.
Great, thanks, Olivia. Like she said, my name is Monica McCubry. I am the outdoor education specialist, the wildlife education specialist for the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. I'm also here in the Lincoln office as well. And I'm also the Nebraska Project Wild State Coordinator. So lots of education efforts, specifically things like ecological education. So kind of like what Olivia is talking about tonight, getting people interested in the outdoors in a variety of different topics and a variety of different age levels as well. So thanks, Olivia.
Great. And so now we want to know a little bit more about you. How many people are watching with you? Where are you located? And what do you hope to learn today? This will really help us better understand future programs and when they don't have to be virtual, where we should do those programs as well. So if you don't mind putting in the chat box the answers to these questions, that would be wonderful. And we'll give you a couple minutes, or about a minute, to do that. Great. Thank you all so much for responding. Alrighty. So when you think of birding, you might think it's this competitive hobby that's male dominated, much like what's portrayed in media and on movies. If any of you have seen The Big Year, that's kind of the characters that are portrayed in that is what many people think about birding. Or maybe you just think it's a bunch of crazy folks chasing these birds around, trying to just get a quick look so that they can mark it off their list. Maybe you've tried birding before, but you haven't felt welcome. Similar to what this cartoon shows, it's a lesser spotted woodpecker son, not a fewer spotted woodpecker. So, you know, sometimes it can feel unwelcoming at times. I know when I first started out as a birder, I could not find anyone my age that was interested in birds. They often looked at me like I was the crazy bird lady, even though I didn't have birds hanging around me like the pigeon lady in Home Alone 2. Sometimes I felt that way. But thankfully, there are more and more birders all over the world, and it's a growing hobby that more and more people are enjoying. And the great thing about birding is that no matter your age, no matter your gender, your skill level, or ability, anybody can enjoy birding. It's a great hobby, and birds are everywhere, and so you can enjoy them at any time. So why are we highlighting women in this presentation today? Well, for one, as I mentioned earlier, March is Nebraska Outdoor Women's Month. And so we really want to encourage more women to partake in these outdoor activities. And for me personally, birding is such a wonderful hobby that I really enjoy, and I want to encourage more women out there to enjoy. The other reason is women can face challenges when it comes to the bird world. There's more women speaking out about facing condescending remarks, intimidation from other birders, even being harassed by other birders. Now, I'm not telling you this to scare you, but I don't want to ignore these women who are brave and come forward. And I want to encourage you to partake in birding, but in a safe manner, like you do with any other outdoor activity. Just follow the proper safety precautions. Another reason why we are focusing on women today is recent research has shown that men and women do have very different birding styles. So the research has found that men tend to be achievement oriented in their motivation. So this is often focusing on listing, getting those rare birds, participating in the competitive aspect of birding, and they will often travel further to see a rare bird. And again, if you've seen the movie The Big Year, it's very similar to what the Owen Wilson's character does. Whereas this research also found that women are more appreciation motivated. So they participate to reduce stress, gain a sense of connection to nature. They tend to bird closer to home, and they reported higher personal enrichment. Now, this isn't to say that women don't like competitive birding, but from these different styles in birding and from the comfort of birding with others, women birding groups have formed all over the world. Now, their missions do vary, but they all want to welcome women into the wonderful world of birds. And pictured here is the Phoebe birding group in Florida. They kind of take a mellow approach where there are no leaders on the bird hikes. They're all learning and teaching each other. And often they celebrate after birding with a big old brunch. So I don't know about you, but birding and brunch, I'm not sure if it can get any better than that. And there's also women groups, birding groups forming in Africa. The Uganda Women's Birders. They aim to turn women who've never used binoculars before into guides so that they can make a living. And it has trained over 30 women to work as guides in East Africa. But there's not always access to birding You can find a mentor or friend to go birding with. I know often women can be overlooked as mentors in the birding world, but there are so many amazing women out there uh, that are willing to be mentors. And like the previous Nebraska Outdoor Women's presentations have highlighted, some of the amazing women in Nebraska and around the world. Um, for me, one of my mentors is Dr. Clara Cooper Mullen. And she really took me under her wing when I was new to Rhode Island. She taught me so much about Eastern songbirds, and I even was fortunate enough to work with her, putting these little tiny tags on the birds so we could track them while they migrated. So I really encourage you, find a mentor, or go with a buddy where, maybe they don't want a bird, but you're walking and you point out birds to them and they become interested. So it's really an amazing experience when you get to share cool behaviors that birds do, or a beautiful bird in your binoculars with someone. And the final reason why we are focusing on women tonight is when you take that appreciation motivated approach to birding that many women do, it can lead to some really great health benefits. It makes you slow down. It makes you not rush. You're listening, you're observing, you're using all your senses, you're paying attention to details, and all of this can really bring relaxation, and it's very much like a mindfulness practice. Again, there's a growing body of research that's showing these benefits of birding to people's health. One of those studies in California found that people that were on the trail hiking that listened to bird songs had a more positive overall experience and felt a greater joy. Another study done in Europe connected a greater bird biodiversity to increase life satisfaction. And they looked at 26,000 people in 26 different countries. And it turns out that people who live near natural areas with a greater diversity of bird species were much happier. And the study also found that seeing 10% more bird species generated a satisfaction on par with a comparable increase in income. So you don't need to make more money, you just need to see more birds. So birds really do make us happy. They force us to stop and pay attention to those details. When we're out birding, we're experiencing the joy of being fully immersed in nature and in the present moment. Again, it's like mindfulness, and it just is very relaxing. And since birds couldn't care less about our concerns, they do serve as powerful reminders that we're part of something larger than just the world inside our own heads. So how do we begin birding? How do you get into this enriching hobby? Well, there are a few tips that will help you have a great birding experience. One of those is time of day. So if you're an early bird, that is wonderful. It'll be easy to get into birding because birds are most active in the mornings. That's when they're singing. They do some really cool behaviors and displays in the morning. But if you're not an early bird person and you don't want to become one, but you do want to watch birds, it's not a lost cause. Birds are around all times of day. And that late mornings and afternoons, it's a great time to observe raptors flying overhead. After a big storm, once the rain is gone, it's a great time to observe birds as they are pretty active and they're starting to sing and eat again. And then come dusk, especially right now, you might see the displaying American woodcock. Come later spring, you might hear whippoorwills and owls. So Birds are around all times of day. It's just early mornings are best for a variety of songbirds that are active and displaying. Time of year, any time of year is a great time of year to bird. Each season brings a variety of species and amazing things to watch. So spring, as many of you in Nebraska know, it's huge migrations through here. We get incredible waterfowl migrations in the central and eastern parts of the state. The Sandhill cranes are in full swing right now. I highly recommend seeing the Sandhill crane migration. Later in the spring, we'll get the shorebirds moving through, as well as the songbirds that are coming up from South America and Central America.
Hey, Olivia.
Yeah.
Someone would like to know, when is the best time to put hummingbird food out?
Great question. It depends on where you're at. If you are in eastern Nebraska, hummingbird food, you could probably start putting it out in May, late May. And it's a good thing to keep out until fall because you might get some of those fall migrants moving through as well. And yeah, I'm not sure where they're located, but it depends on, I mean, if you're not in Nebraska, it might be worth having out all year round. I hope that answers their question. Please stop me.
It looks like they're in Illinois.
So. Okay. Yeah. May to October is a great time of year to have the hummingbird feeders out. Great question. And then, yeah, speaking of hummingbird feeders, you know, summertime, you might even see hummingbirds nesting in the eastern part of the state, as well as some other great birds like the orioles that build these incredible nests. And it's really fun just to watch them build these nests and feed their young. Fall, again, we get these incredible migrations of waterfowl and songbirds moving through. And in winter, I don't know about you, I don't always like to go out in the cold. So sometimes it's nice to just have a cup of coffee and look out my window at the backyard birds. But if you're feeling more adventurous, winter raptors are also great all across the state. When it comes to location, any place with food, water, shelter, space, it's great for birds. You can bird in a prairie, in an urban area, in your own backyard, in a forest. Really, anywhere is a great place to bird. And then when it comes to gear, you know, I get a lot of questions about this. You can bird with nothing, or you can bird with a lot of stuff. It just depends on what you're interested in, what you want to spend money on, what you want to borrow. You can borrow binoculars from friends, and there's other outfitters that you can rent binoculars from as well. Cameras, scopes, if you like to sketch birds or keep a paper list, having a journal is great. There are tons of field guides out there, just depending on what you're looking for. If you want a pamphlet of the state birds, or a book of all the birds in North America, or just the eastern and western species. If you're not into the actual books and you want an app on your phone, I use the Sibley Bird ID app, and I find it does cost money, but I find that it's worth the cost. It's basically a full field guide at the tip of my fingers. And it also has the songs and calls, which I find very helpful. As a beginning birder, the Merlin Bird ID app is a great app to have. It helps you figure out what you're looking at. So it takes you through these steps of what size is the bird that you're looking at, what colors is it, what was it doing? So was it at a feeder? Was it on the ground? And then it narrows down based on your location and what you put in there, the potential species that you're looking at. And I'm gonna be like a parent. Don't forget to wear your sunscreen and make sure you take water and proper clothing and shoes. I've made all of these mistakes and I don't want you to make these mistakes. So please come prepared to be outside and in the elements.
Olivia, we had a question about, hummingbird feeders. They said they keep seeing on Facebook that hummingbird feeders should be out in mid-April in eastern Nebraska. She said this seems awfully early, but she's seen it several times. Has it changed, or are they coming earlier this year or something?
You could be getting migrants. I mean, early April, it doesn't hurt to have it out, especially if they are moving through then. Yeah, I don't see a problem with putting it out in April. One thing to note is just, make sure that you keep it clean and that you are replacing the water every so often. But yeah, early mid-April is fine. You might be fortunate to get hummingbirds. I know in my backyard, we only get like 1 or 2 a year, unfortunately. But if you're in eastern Nebraska, I don't see why not.
All right, thank you.
Yep. All righty, so how do you identify the birds now? Now that you're out there, what are you seeing? So there are a lot of things to consider when you're learning to bird and trying to figure out what you're looking at. The big thing is to just get an overall impression of it. So one of the things you want to look at to start off is the size of the bird. And you want to do this relative to birds you're already familiar with. So if you're looking at a songbird, is it about the size of a wren? Is it more like the size of a goldfinch or a robin? And then, if you're looking at other birds, is it as large as an eagle or is it more like a flicker? So just use the birds that you know and are familiar with to kind of compare those sizes. You also want to look at the shape of the bird. So get that overall shape and posture. Think about it relative to other birds you're familiar with again. So is it perching like a songbird? Is it clinging to a tree like a woodpecker? And this is kind of just giving examples where you might be looking at a bird and just seeing the similar shape and overall impression. And then one of my favorite things is watching their behavior. This can really provide insight into the bird species that you're looking at. So is it perched high up in the tree canopy and singing? Is it perched out in the open on a stick with nothing around? Is it maybe catching insects in the air and these acrobatic flights? Or maybe it's soaring through the sky like a turkey vulture. Maybe you're watching it at your feeder and it's hopping on the ground. These are all important behaviors to look at and make note of. And then you also want to look at the markings. Markings can be very overwhelming for a beginning birder, even for an intermediate birder. There's a lot of body parts to know, a lot of different markings to look at on a lot of different birds, but don't worry, don't get overwhelmed. You know, just again, I can't reiterate, get that overall impression. And so if you have this bird that we're showing here in your binoculars, something you might notice is it's pretty much all blue. There's black in the wings and tail. It kind of looks like the size of a goldfinch. And all of these impressions can help narrow the species down. If you are looking a little bit closer at markings, some things you might want to pay attention to is the bill. So is it a thick bill? Is it crossed? Is it thin? Or maybe it's even curved? Does the bird have a tail tip? So is the tip of the tail a different color than the rest of the tail? Maybe it looks like the bird is wearing glasses. This is referred to as an eye ring. This can help also distinguish species. Beak color, is it all one color? Does it change colors? Is it pale? Is it black? Is it orange? And then you can also look at leg color. Leg color is a good trait to look at in species that look the same, like some of the shorebirds and some of the fall migrants of songbirds. But again, don't become overwhelmed with the markings. Get that overall impression and just make notes in your phone or journal, different things that you're noticing about the bird. Another great tip for birding is listening. So you're using a whole new sense when it comes to birding. You're using your ears and really paying attention to the birds' songs. And this can be overwhelming at first. Well, I should say it's always overwhelming, even as an experienced and intermediate birder. There's always new calls and songs to learn, but a great tip is to start with the songs you already know or the backyard birds that you see often, like the chickadee. Its call is basically its name, so chickadee-dee-dee-dee. Or even the barred owl. Maybe you haven't heard a barred owl before, but you know the iconic "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" So start with those basic species, and then work your way up to other species that maybe sound like they're saying their name, like the phoebe, which basically just says its name. And so over and over again, it's basically just going Phoebe. Or maybe you hear a really distinct and weird call that's unlike anything else you've ever heard. And a soar is one of those examples where it's just so unique and so distinct that nothing else sounds like it. So once you learn that song, it's and you're in a marsh, like the saline wetlands around Lincoln, you may hear these guys going and you'll never forget it. And so I'll play that here. And it basically is this descending whiny call that, I don't know, it kind of reminds me of a really bad laugh. And then even as you become more familiar with birds, you'll notice on TV, sometimes you'll see a bald eagle, but it's really not a bald eagle calling. It's actually a red tail calling. And so you'll pick up on these things, and it becomes a pet peeve, but it's all very enjoyable. So I got sidetracked there, but bringing it back to IDing birds, you want to think about the habitat. So are you in the prairie? Are you in the forest? Are you in a wetland? These can really help you distinguish species and help you figure out what you're looking at. And finally, you want to think about the range. So Nebraska is unique in the fact that we get a lot of eastern species and we get a lot of western species. And so it's really important to think about those ranges. A lot of it overlaps in the state, which can make it difficult. But if you are in the eastern part of the state, especially along the Missouri River, you're going to get some unique species that you won't find out in the western part of the state, and vice versa. So to just recap really quick, when you're identifying birds, get that overall impression of the size and the shape. Watch the behavior, even if it's just for enjoyment, even if you can't ID the bird, behaviors can really, it's really enjoyable and can really help you figure out what you're looking at. If you do get the bird in your binoculars, take a look a little bit closer at those markings. Think about the song and the call, the habitat that it's in, as well as the range. And I can't not give this talk and talk a little bit about the birding etiquette. So always respect wildlife and other bird watchers and wildlife watchers. If you see an animal and it seems nervous, back off, give it some space. Don't disturb it. I know with cell phones these days, they all have cameras and you might want to try and get a picture of it up close, but keep your distance. You can always take a picture by holding your cell phone up to your binoculars or your scope. Silence is key when it comes to birding, as well as any other wildlife watching. Just be quiet, encourage your companions to be quiet as well. And it will help you hear and see more wildlife. Always stay on trails. Don't stress a bird out. It might think that you're chasing it if you go off trail. And be considerate of other bird watchers. So being quiet, not disturbing the wildlife, respect property boundaries, and don't litter. So these are all important things when it comes to watching birds as well as other wildlife. So we're ready to go birding. All right, so we're in a forest in eastern Nebraska and we're out walking this path and we notice a bird up in the left-hand corner of our screen. What do we notice about this bird? So the one in the upper left-hand corner that just made that flight, go ahead and put in the chat some of the things that you notice, and Monica can read a couple of those out loud.
So someone said that they have yellow on the wings and the tail feather. They have pretty distinctive markings.
Great.
Just a touch of red or orange. They have a very wide tail, short beak. They notice to be perching.
Perfect.
Short legs.
Great. You all are pros. We didn't even need to get it in our binoculars, but if we are fortunate to get this quick little bird that moves around in our binoculars, like you all had mentioned, it's a perching bird. It's smaller. It does have a shorter beak, and it does have those distinct yellowish orange markings. Some of the, like you mentioned, It's got its tail fanned out. That's a distinct behavior that this bird does. And that fanning of the tail actually helps scare up insects. And so then it will fly very quickly and catch those insects off of leaves and sticks and in the air. We didn't really see it here, but when you're out in the field, you might also see that it's got a pale underside, as well as black throat and chest. And then, as someone mentioned, the thin short bill. And this would help you narrow it down to the American redstart. And then you might even see it with a female, which is slightly different in coloration. It's got more yellow markings with a gray head and more olive body tone. And these guys are very common in eastern Nebraska come spring and summer. All right, we're back birding and we're walking down the trail and we notice a bird crawling up the side of the tree trunk. What do we notice about this bird? Go ahead and put what you see about this bird in the chat.
So someone right away said they have a very long tail. They have an eye stripe, white underbelly, kind of some spotting on their back and like a white kind of underbelly again, thin long beak, kind of a curved thin long beak.
Wow, man, I don't even think I need to be teaching you all about birding. Yes, it's got that thin, long beak that's slightly curved, pale undersides, the brown and white markings, and as someone pointed out, that long tail that's very pointed. And this would help you narrow it down to the brown creeper. They kind of act like woodpeckers and nuthatches, the way they crawl up the side of a tree. And they also have a distinct call that once you learn it, it's you might be hearing it as you're walking through the forest without even seeing this bird that blends in so well with the bark. So it's really high pitched and can be a little bit difficult to hear at times. Okay, and now we're back on the path and we notice a bird out in front of us. Go ahead again. What do you notice about that bird?
People are saying that this one walks on the ground.
Great.
Short beak, thick short beak. They're kind of hopping.
Yeah, those are all great tips. So yes, this bird is hopping on the ground. It's got that thick short beak. It kind of is the overall brown colored bird with white underbelly and that really bright rufous flank. And maybe we notice that it's about the size of a robin. But that behavior of hopping on the ground and it sometimes kicks up leaves is very distinct of the eastern towhee. And they're looking and foraging for seeds and insects on the ground. And often you might hear rustling on the ground and you might not even see this bird because it blends in so well. But they have another distinct song that sounds like they're saying, "Drink your tea." So if you remember that "drink your tea" with eastern towhee, that's a great way to identify this bird. All right, and we're almost done walking down the path. We're just about done birding. And we hear a bird and it makes us look up. So it's got that chick-beer sound. And we would have missed this bird otherwise if we didn't hear that call. Even if we didn't recognize what that call was, it makes us look up into the canopy and see this bright red bird that's got black wings and a black tail. And it's just so beautiful. And we would have missed it otherwise if we didn't follow where that call was coming from. And this is the male scarlet tanager. The female is more yellow and olive green color with darker wings. And they come to the eastern Nebraska forests in spring and summer. But they are secretive and they are in the upper canopy of the forest. But birds can be challenging to ID, even for experienced birders. As many of you have seen the past couple of slides, male and female birds can look different. Many birds change plumage from their beautiful spring plumage to a more dull fall and winter plumage. So don't get discouraged if you don't know what a bird is. They can be challenging. And even with these tips, always remember to just be patient. Birds don't always stay put for you to get your binoculars on them, but just enjoy them when you can. All right, so now where can we go birding? If you're in Nebraska, or you're visiting Nebraska, there's some really unique landscapes throughout the state with some amazing birds and wildlife there. So the Missouri River landscape that runs through Omaha has some amazing wetlands that can attract the snow geese and waterfowl in spring and fall, as well as a large number of eagles and other songbirds. Fontenelle Forest is a great place to go if you're looking to hike around in those eastern forests of Nebraska. You might see some of those birds that we saw on our little bird walk through the forest, like the scarlet tanager and brown creeper. Platte River, a little bit further west in the state, has some amazing landscapes like Schramm Park. There's a short loop trail there, and there's also some bird feeders at the Education Center. For those of you that aren't early birds, you can still see the birds hanging out at the bird feeders, and you may also hear whippoorwills at dusk. As well as see some other really amazing birds. Here in around Lincoln, or the Saline Wetlands, this is such a unique area and really cool. It's got these deep buried salts that are brought to the soil surface through groundwater flow. And so it has vegetation that's salt tolerant. And it does attract some really cool species like the weird sounding sora that I played earlier. Maybe you notice a bright yellow bird like the yellow warbler. Maybe you watch the northern shovelers forage with their big spoonbills. They filter out crustaceans and seeds in the water through these comb-like projections and these big, thick spoon-shaped bills. A great place to go for saline wetlands is Frank Schumacher Marsh. Moving further west to the Central Platte River landscape. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the Sandhill crane migration It's really phenomenal, and we're so fortunate to have it here in Nebraska. If you haven't seen this migration, I highly recommend it. Or even if you have seen this migration, it's something worth seeing again. And then I'm biased, but I love the Cherry County wetland landscape. I love the Sandhills. There's so many unique birds there, as well as wildlife. You can reserve a spot in prairie chicken and sharp-tailed grouse blinds. You might see upland sandpipers on the fence posts out there. Burrowing owls hang out and actually breed in the prairie dog colony that's at Fort Niobrara National Wildlife Refuge. And then one of my favorites is the American bittern, which is pictured there. And it holds its neck up and it's got these brown streaks, so it blends in with the reeds. And it actually sways with the wind, so it really blends in. But it's got such a funny sound. I hope you all can hear that, but it kind of sounds like if you throw a rock into a pond. It's just, they're really entertaining. And then if you're in the western part of the state, Wildcat Hills is really unique and has some great trails to hike around in. I was just there in January, and it's a great place for winter raptors. You can see golden eagles and ferruginous hawks. There's huge numbers of pine siskins that hang out at the feeders at the education center there. But all this to say, you don't have to travel far. You can attract birds to your own backyard. As some of you were asking about hummingbird feeders earlier, there's so many other types of bird feeders you can put up too. And I'm just going to quickly run through these, but tray feeders are great for all types of birds. Suet cage, if you are just starting out with backyard bird feeding, these are like $5 at a local hardware store, and they attract some cool woodpeckers and nuthatches. If you are willing to spend a little bit more, hopper feeders are great for protecting the seed from the elements. Tube feeders are great for finches. And then one of my favorites is the oriole feeders. And you can put those out in spring and summer to attract the beautiful orange and black orioles. But always remember, just be patient, have fun, sit, watch, listen, and enjoy the wonderful birds all around you. And I really encourage you, when you do see a new bird or you get an ID right, or you're just excited, celebrate. Just celebrate those little wins, those little achievements of IDing a bird and seeing a new one. And I know for myself, I'll never be bored of birds. They're always surprising me. They are so adaptive and have such extreme determination, and you know, watching them closely, whether it's a robin building its nest on my gutter or watching birds in the field, it's really a full sensory experience, and it brings so much joy, along with often inevitable misidentifications, but it also brings exhilarating moments of discovery. And so there's really nothing greater than enjoying the wonderful world of birds. And with that, thank you all so much. Here are a few resources for that I've mentioned in my talk or haven't mentioned, but for Nebraska, there's the Nebraska Ornithologists Union and Audubon state chapters that are great for getting to know more birders around the state. If you're wanting to look at range maps and learn more about the birds of Nebraska, visit Birds of Nebraska online, and other great resources below that as well. Larkwire is a great one for learning bird songs and quizzing yourself. And then if you're interested in upcoming events, City Nature Challenge is coming up. You can find it in a city near you, but if you are in Lincoln, I highly encourage you to participate. It's April 30th to May 3rd. And to kick things off, April 6th, Jason at Spring Creek Prairie is giving a talk about bird sights and sounds of spring. And then there will be a bird hike May 8th at Rock Creek State Historical Park, as well as third Tuesday bird walks. And if you want to know more information, you can email me or follow us on Facebook at Nebraska Watchable Wildlife. And one more announcement. If you want to support non-game research and viewing opportunities in Nebraska, consider donating to Nebraska Wildlife Conservation Fund, and you can do so at the website below. And with that, I will take any questions. Again, follow us on Facebook and feel free to email me with any additional questions as well. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Olivia. That was great. And one more thing to add too is if you are interested in birds, as obviously you are because you watched this today, May is Nebraska Migratory Bird Month, or just Nebraska Bird Month. So we will be having tons of more probably virtual events and hopefully in-person events as well. So be on the lookout for that as well. We will be celebrating birds all through the month of May too. And someone did have a question about the bird app that you mentioned earlier. Do you know if that is a one-time fee or like a monthly annual charge?
So the Sibley Bird app is a one-time fee. And the Merlin Bird ID app is free.
Awesome.
And then I think if you want to download Larkwire and quiz yourself on bird songs, that's a one-time fee as well.
Someone wanted to know, they recently saw some murmurations of sparrows and they were completely amazed. Do these occur seasonally, or is it just the nature of some specific birds?
So sparrows, depends on where you're at, but sparrows are around all year. There are some that winter in Nebraska, but they do migrate further north, as well as some that are wintering further south from us, but they'll come up to Nebraska to breed and nest as well. So yeah, there's sparrows are around all year. It just depends on the species, and just keep an eye out for them. Get them in your binoculars and take a look at which species you're looking at.
They also want to know if murmurations are a breeding behavior.
So when they're singing, so if it's a song, that's a breeding behavior, but they do make sounds and calls throughout winter. It's kind of their way of communicating. Yeah, so birds may call in winter or year round, but if they're starting to sing, it's often they're trying to stake out their territory. But if it's pretty cold out still, and if it's winter time, then they're just communicating.
All right, and then someone asked if you're hoping to take pictures to help identify a bird later, would you recommend like a regular camera or possibly a binocular option that has a camera?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, it just depends on what you're willing to spend, what you want to invest in. I don't have one of the connections from my phone to my binoculars. I am old school, and I will literally hold my phone up to the binocular piece. It can be a little bit challenging, but it it works for me. I do have a camera with a decent zoom on it, so if I am trying to get pictures of a bird, I'll use that as well. But I hope that answers their questions. There's just depends on what you're willing to spend and what you want to invest in. If you're frustrated with trying to get a picture through your phone and binoculars, then it might be worth investing in a camera.
All right, and then someone said they live in Waterloo and they don't see many Baltimore Orioles. Would setting out a feeder attract them even if they don't see them?
It depends. That's a great question. I mean, you can start out with like setting out oranges and jelly to try and attract Orioles. You might not see them because they're around in spring and summer when the leaves are on the trees and they're up in the canopy. So they might be there and you just haven't seen them yet. But, you know, Orioles aren't in everybody's yard. There's a good chance, you know, if you set one out that you might get them. But it might just be worth setting out some orange slices and some jelly to start out with.
Awesome. And yeah, someone mentioned hungrylittlebirdie.com has some cool live cams if you are interested in visiting or watching some live cams of feeding birds.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, I didn't know about that site either.
I'm going to write that down.
hungrylittlebirdie.com.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, looks like all the questions for now.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining me. This was wonderful that you could join, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Again, if you have more questions, please email me. And if you want to know more about the events that are coming up, follow us on Facebook, and I'll be posting more about what's happening in Nebraska.
Someone asked, will your slideshow be out on Facebook or the internet to look back at it later? Because I thought they were very interesting.
Monica, do you know where this recording will be?
Yeah, so we did record it today and it will be on our Game and Parks Education YouTube channel. So if you simply go to YouTube and search Nebraska Game and Parks Education, you should be able to find a bunch of playlists, and it will probably be under, I think it's a birding playlist. So it will probably get that up by probably end of the day tomorrow. It should be up.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much again, and I hope you have a wonderful night.
Thanks, Olivia.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that you're saving the chat, right?
I just did, yeah.
Okay, I didn't want you to forget. I didn't want to be a pain, but I know you probably had it written down, but just wanted to double check. So
Yes, I appreciate that. And I'm going to double check that it's saved before I exit out.